I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all.
That was US President Trump's reaction after Russia unleashed the largest aerial attack of the war on Ukraine overnight into Sunday, killing around a dozen people, including children. Russian missiles and over 300 drones rained down on cities. It marked the third night Ukrainians woke to the sound of Russian aerial attacks, according to its Air Force. In a Truth Social post, Trump said Vladimir Putin had, quote, gone absolutely crazy, and that he was considering new sanctions on Moscow in light of these ongoing strikes. Although Trump also criticised Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskiy, saying that the leader was doing, quote, his country no favours by talking the way he does. In response to these remarks, the Kremlin said Trump and others might be emotionally overloaded, while thanking him for his assistance in launching peace negotiations. The US president's been trying to get both sides to agree to a ceasefire in the 3-year-old war in Ukraine.
We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
The Kremlin said the attacks on Ukraine were directed at military targets and were a response to significant Ukrainian attacks on Russian civilian targets. Zelensky, in a post on X, said Russia can only be constrained by force and called again for additional sanctions on Russia.
Today, we're jumping right into a really critical topic, the latest in the Ukraine conflict.
Yeah, specifically looking at a Reuters report from May 26th.
And what's really catching the eye is, well, a potential change in how former President Trump is talking about Putin.
Right, and this is happening alongside some very, very intense attacks in Ukraine.
And as usual, you have Kiev and Moscow offering completely different takes on what's going on.
Absolutely. So our mission here, for you listening, is really to cut through those headlines.
Get to the core statements, understand the context of these recent attacks.
And figure out what the potential implications might be. We're pulling from, Trump's own words, the view from Ukraine, the Kremlin's reaction.
And the news report itself, trying to piece it all together without you getting swamped by the Tor 407 news feed.
Exactly. So where do we start digging in?
Okay, let's kick off with Trump's statements. The report points out he posted on Truth Social right in the middle of a heavy series of Russian airstrikes. I mean, the third night running.
Wow. Yeah.
And the quote that really stands out is him calling Putin completely mad.
Completely mad. That's strong language.
It is, especially given, his previous rhetoric about Putin. What do you make of the timing and the phrasing there?
Well, the timing is key, isn't it? It's not just a random comment. It's made while Ukraine is under this sustained bombardment.
Right.
And he didn't stop there. He also claims Putin wants, quote, all of Ukraine, not just a piece.
So he's suggesting Putin's goal is total occupation.
That seems to be his interpretation, yeah.
Great.
Which is definitely a harder line than we've sometimes heard from him.
It really is. And then there's his prediction that if Putin did try that, it would actually cause Russia to collapse.
A pretty bold prediction.
Yeah. But then, almost in the same breath, he criticizes President Zelensky.
Oh, right, I saw that.
Saying Zelensky gains nothing for his country by speaking the way he does. He even says Zelensky's statements cause problems and should stop.
So condemning Putin's aggression, but also critiquing the leader of the country being attacked. It's
a bit of a mixed message, isn't it?
It is. It's complex. He seems to be condemning the violence, maybe Putin's ultimate aims, but also suggesting Zelensky's approach, maybe his rhetoric or diplomacy, isn't helping.
And didn't he also mention potential sanctions?
Yes, that came up separately with reporters in New Jersey. He apparently said he was considering new sanctions against Russia, adding, I am not happy about it.
Not happy about it. So again, expressing disapproval of Russia's actions.
Definitely. And he also specifically mentioned the human cost. He said he is killing many people, referring to Putin.
So a real mix of condemnation, prediction, and critique. How did the Kremlin take all this? Especially the mad comment.
Well, their response was interesting. According to the report, they did a couple of things. First, they actually brought up Trump's previous support for peace talks.
Oh, sort of acknowledging him.
Yeah, maybe keeping a line open, you could say, hedging their bets, perhaps.
Could be.
But on the mad comments specifically, their spokesperson, Peskov, basically dismissed it, called it potential emotional overload.
Emotional overload, like
Yeah.
everyone's just a bit stressed right now?
Kind of, yeah. Suggesting it wasn't a serious political statement, more just emotion talking. They didn't really engage with the substance of it.
Right. Just deflected.
Pretty much. And then they fell back on their standard line.
It's a special military operation.
Exactly. The justification that it's all to protect Russia from NATO. That's their consistent narrative.
Yeah.
And they also added that these recent heavy airstrikes were supposedly a response to, quote, significant attacks by Ukraine on Russian civilian targets.
Framing their own attacks as retaliation.
Precisely. Which, as you can imagine, is not how Kyiv sees it at all.
No kidding. So let's shift to Ukraine's perspective then. Zelenskyy's view. Did he respond directly to Trump's criticism in his nightly address?
Apparently not directly, no. The report suggests he didn't mention Trump's comments in that specific video address.
Any thoughts on why? Focusing elsewhere?
That seems likely. His focus, understandably, was squarely on the immediate crisis. He talked about the sheer volume of the attacks, over 900 drones and missiles in just 3 nights.
Just staggering numbers.
It really is. And he explicitly called these attacks Putin's political choice. A choice to continue the war, to destroy lives, not some kind of military necessity.
So framing it as deliberate terror, essentially.
Yes, that's the clear message. He rejected any idea that these attacks were strategically unavoidable. For him, it's about Putin's will to inflict damage.
So his priority was clearly rallying support and condemning the attacks, rather than getting drawn into that specific exchange with Trump.
It seems that way. And following on from that, Zelensky really pushed for, quote, full pressure on Russia.
Meaning more sanctions, more weapons.
All of the above, presumably. Every possible measure, he said, to limit Russia's ability to wage war. His message is about resistance and needing more international help.
Okay, so let's dive into the details of these attacks themselves. Both sides mentioned drone swarms. What else do we know?
Well, Ukraine's Air Force said Russian strikes hit 5 different locations one night, though they didn't specify exactly where or what.
Right.
But the Kremlin region was definitely hit hard. That's where an airbase is located. They reported 7 cruise missiles and dozens of drones targeting that area.
And was there damage?
Yes, damage to residential buildings and industrial sites was reported there. And tragically, in the Odessa region, down by the Black Sea, a 14-year-old was injured.
Awful. And what did Russia say about those specific strikes?
Well, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed they successfully hit the Starokostiantinov air base in Kalnitsky.
So conflicting claims again. Russia claims a successful military strike. Ukraine reports damage to civilian areas too.
Exactly. It's that constant information battle running alongside the actual fighting. Hard to get a perfectly clear picture.
And didn't these attacks come right after another massive assault?
They did. The report mentions the night before leading into Sunday saw what was described as possibly the largest air attack of the war, at least in terms of the number of weapons used.
Largest in terms of weapons? How many?
At least 367 drones and missiles. A huge number. And that attack reportedly killed at least 12 people.
12 people, including children.
Yes. Tragically, 3 children were reported killed in the Zhytomyr region from that attack.
Just devastating. So while maybe not the highest death toll in a single attack, the sheer scale of the weaponry was unprecedented.
That seems to be the point, yeah. A real escalation in the intensity of the aerial campaign.
But it's not entirely one-sided, is it? The report mentions Ukrainian actions, too.
Correct. It notes Ukraine has also been using drones to strike inside Russia. Some of these attacks have even forced airports around Moscow to temporarily close.
Right, so it underscores that the conflict isn't just contained within Ukraine's borders.
Definitely not. It's a complex back-and-forth situation.
Which leads us to the bigger picture here, this war. It's been over 3 years now.
Sadly, yes. And the fundamental positions of Russia and Ukraine on how it should end, they seem as far apart as ever.
And the fighting itself, especially in the east, seems to be escalating, not winding down.
That's what reports suggest, yeah. Russian forces apparently making some advances there. It's a really difficult grinding phase.
The report also brings up some interesting context about Trump and European leaders.
Right. It touches on past frustrations. European leaders had apparently struggled to get Trump during his presidency to fully back their approach or impose really tough new sanctions on Russia.
And now?
Well, there's a mention that French President Macron is perhaps hopeful that Trump's latest, much harsher criticism of Putin might signal a shift.
Maybe leading to the kind of stronger sanctions Europe has wanted.
That seems to be the hope expressed, yes. It highlights how statements from figures like Trump can ripple out internationally.
Absolutely. And underlying all of this, we have to remember the core disagreement, don't we?
We do. For Ukraine, this is fundamentally an unprovoked war of aggression. Full stop.
While for the Kremlin, it remains this special military operation designed, in their view, to protect Russian security interests.
Those two worldviews are just fundamentally incompatible right now.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key takeaways here. We've got former President Trump changing his tune, using really strong language, like completely mad about Putin.
All while Russia's carrying out these incredibly intense airstrikes.
Meanwhile, Ukraine, led by Zelensky, is standing firm, calling the attacks a deliberate political act by Putin, not a military necessity.
And the Kremlin. They acknowledge Trump's old calls for peace, but they sort of wave away his mad comment as just emotion.
While sticking to their narrative that they're defending themselves and retaliating against Ukraine.
And hopefully for you listening, seeing how these different pieces connect, Trump's words, Kyiv's defiance, Moscow's justifications, the reality of the attacks gives you a more rounded understanding than just the headlines might offer.
Exactly. We hope this deep dive helped connect those dots for you. So maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
Given Trump's, let's say, track record of sometimes unpredictable statements and the Kremlin's fairly dismissive reaction to his latest harsh words, what's the actual real-world shelf life of this rhetoric?
Good question.
Will this apparent hardening of his stance really shift anything long-term in the conflict or in international relations? Or is it another moment that might, blow over?
And what does it tell us about how difficult it is to interpret what major global players really mean, especially when tensions are this high?
Lots to think about there. Thanks for diving deep with us today.